Welcome back to another SCBWI featured illustrator interview. My name is Tamika Grooms, and I'm the Design and Illustration Manager for SCBWI. Every month, we select an Illustrator member to spotlight on the SCBWI website and social media pages to highlight the work that they're doing in the children's illustration market. This month's featured illustrator is Haley Grunloh. Haley, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Excited to talk to you.
Excellent, excellent. So I have a lot of questions for you because, well, not because of, but your art is very unique. And in terms of what we typically see in SCBWI's Illustrator Gallery. And I don't even remember how I found your work, but it stood out to me because the illustration is really good. And it's also scientific illustration, which I don't normally see a lot of. But your execution of it is superb. So thank you for sharing that with us on the website.
Wow, thank you.
Mhm. So I really want to start out by you sharing with us a little bit about how you got into doing scientific illustration, specifically for young readers, even though I know, let me just share this a little bit about me. I'm old enough to remember the encyclopedias and having them at home, and I love them. And I really enjoyed being able to go through the encyclopedias and learn information and seeing illustrations along with it because I'm more of a visual learner. So I really would like to learn more about how you got into doing scientific illustration for children.
Yeah, so I guess my backstory is I'm still a very recent graduate of the scientific illustration graduate program at California State Monterey Bay, which was an amazing experience, and it's really pushed me into that world, which is what I wanted from it. But there's sort of a few different aspects that made me want to chase after that kind of work. And so before I went to grad school, I worked for a really long time in a public library, which is a great place to be. um, and a lot of what we did there was like I did a lot of program planning, so like activities for the neighborhood families and for school visits. Sometimes STEM education related, a lot of times just fun crafts, different kinds of activities. Um, but one of the things I would do is I would end up making these little illustrated instruction sheets that were like I would want to have them because I wanted the activity to be all explained on one easily photocopyable sheet, which would look nice and it would explain the project clearly with little illustrations, and you could easily give them out to parents to take home, and I could easily like hand them to a coworker to do the same activity. It was very convenient. Um, and I really had just a great time uh, making illustrations to explain something and explain how to do something. They're just really fun. um, and um, it got me on this track of wanting to make illustrations that can support educators. And if I can make some kind of visual aid that a teacher can use to explain something and get their point across, I think like that's a really good goal to have for a project.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and another element that's really important to me is creating art that's informed by a close study of nature. So I don't want to just put random trees and little plants in the background of my illustration. I want to find out like what specific trees and little plants belong in a specific place, and it gives the scene more specificity and richness. Um, and I guess this is getting into sort of what the things that inspire me, and it might be a little bit cheesy, um, but I've always been interested in like just looking closely at natural forms, and every little bug or little plant or anything is like once you start looking closely about it and studying it and reading about it, um, every little thing is super complex and interesting. And even like the little weeds that you see growing in the sidewalk, each one kind of has their own very specific physical structures that you can look at, which all serve specific functions. They all have a long, complicated evolutionary history that's formed them into what they are. And they all have complicated relationships and interactions with other organisms that share their environment. Like nothing is like little plants and bugs, they're not passive objects. They're actively doing interesting things all the time. Um, it's kind of overwhelming in a way. There's just like too much cool stuff happening in the world.
I I
Um,
to I totally
yeah.
agree with you.
But nobody will never get around to illustrating all of the cool things in the world. I think we have to work hard as illustrators to make sure as many little plants and bugs get their beautiful art dedicated to them.
So you're speaking my language. I just spent my morning time in the garden, and so I really love, especially in the early spring. I'm in Georgia, so we're already starting to get a little bit warm. But I love to kind of dive into the dirt and turn things over, and some things I'm planting seeds, and some things I'm planting them inside. But like you said, all of it's living, and I even say that the rocks are living. But there's living things everywhere, and it's all starting to come alive now. So it is very intriguing. It's exciting to me. And I'm glad that, that also kind of, stirs you up as well and to create illustrations for us for that. So, um,
Yeah.
um, so, were you always interested in it as a child? Or is this something that you kind of developed as an adult? And I'm also curious about, when you went to Pratt, was that always something that you were interested in doing too?
Um, so yeah, first thing, yes, I was always obsessed with animals. Like as far as I can remember, I've always just been the biggest nerd.
Mhm.
Um, and I love like getting to work on a project where I get to learn something new. It's like that's its own reward in a way. And I never, I mean, maybe as a little kid, I had some ideas of like, I'm gonna be a herpetologist or a marine biologist or like whatever. I would always just be the most excited about like whatever I happened to read something about most recently. So it was all over the place. But I never really seriously wanted to be a scientist and do research. I was more like just an avid consumer of like popular science media and like sci-com content. Um, I have always listened to a lot of podcasts. I know like we're artists. I listen to stuff while I work. So I've just like I have interviews with scientists playing to entertain me. Um, I love reading books about natural history, especially like memoirs by people who are working with animals in some way or who are out doing like field research in some exotic place that I get to hear about vicariously. And I think zoologists to me are kind of like celebrity pop stars that I I like want to follow their exploits.
Nice.
Um, yeah, and then like, recently I'm sort of still very early in my career, but having had some opportunities to collaborate with scientists and work on projects with them and um, make art for people working on conservation, communication. It's been like kind of a dream come true.
Yeah.
Um, and oh yeah, you did ask me about Pratt. Yeah, that was so I went to Pratt for undergrad, and I have a BFA in animation. I don't know at the time if I really made the connection with like I was interested in that stuff, but I don't know that at that time in my life I really thought that hard about like, oh, you could make animation for science communication. I just didn't put that together. They were
Mhm.
kind of separate. So no, I wasn't really thinking from the beginning. That's sort of like I think that ambition came together more in the years after I graduated. And while I was working at the library, and working with a lot of educators of different kinds.
Yeah.
Uh, and but yeah, but I did some animation once I went back to school for science illustration. I ended up doing some animation projects as part of grad school and afterwards, so that the skill from my undergrad did come back around. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm. So that's one of the things that also stood out about your website for me is that you incorporate animation into um, your scientific illustration, and it's just a really unique way, especially for people who are young kids nowadays. They interact with technology. They're used to things having motion and giving us extra information beyond words and pictures. And so adding that animation part of it just it puts another layer of interest to me. So that was a nice little treat as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the materials that you use and your process? And I have an additional question. Do you travel? Do you travel to do this type of work?
oh gosh. So far, oh, what should I answer first?
Let's do the materials first since I added the
Okay, that
travel
one's
part.
not it yeah, the materials, I that this isn't gonna be a really exciting question. I just use Adobe, Photoshop, and Illustrator,
Oh,
and
okay.
After Effects for animation. I do have, the 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 Blue Jay painting. I
Uh-huh.
could show, like, just what the sorta stages look like. I
I
put
would.
them together, but, it's just a painting in Photoshop. I don't use too many
That's really
mixed media.
interesting. When I looked at
Um,
it, and I'm looking at it on my second screen, when I
yeah.
look at it, I thought it was colored pencil, watercolor, traditional material. So you fooled me.
That's funny. I do like I think, I love watercolors.
Uh-huh.
I don't use colored pencils too much anymore because, it hurts my hand more.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I have a little bit of physical thing that prevents me from using certain media too much.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but, I do think, like, the way that I paint in Photoshop, which is sort of, there's a lot of transparent colors layered on top of each other, is kind of not deliberately, but subconsciously informed by, like, my practice with watercolor where you're glazing colors over each other.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it does have an effect, but, yeah, most of my portfolio is Photoshop paintings.
Nice. Nice. Okay. And now my second question, do you travel very much to get your inspiration or to get information about what you're creating?
I would love to.
Uh-huh.
I would love to travel more. So far, most of, um like, I grew up in Connecticut in the New England environment, and then I went to grad school in, um, this sort of Central Coast area, of California. And my extended family is all in a lot in the Southern California. So those are the only places I've been.
Gotcha. Okay.
But, I would love to and it is, like I think if I can either visit the place that I'm going like, that I'm gonna work on an art that's about, or if it's somewhere that I've already been, it adds a lot of, um, depth to how it comes out. Like, I have worked on some projects where I decided I wanted to draw lemurs, and I've never been to Madagascar, and it was really fun to study lemurs and learn to draw them, but I don't think those pieces have, like, the richness that the pieces set in California or Connecticut have.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I would love to travel more places and work on projects that are based in those places in the future.
Yeah. Well, the benefit of being an artist is that you can travel to do those things and it's a write-off. So, there's always that possibility. And the world is big. So there's so many things to study and to draw and to write about. So, um,
Never run out of material.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I want to hop on over to your website. This is the featured illustration that we have on the website. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I love this image. Um, I am a person who loves landscape. I thought that I did not like to draw landscapes until I started to do it more often. And and I do really love it. And I love your execution of everything in this with the animal, the people, as well as the environment. I thought you struck a really nice balance to tell a little bit of a story too in one image. So this is a great one. And I'm still having a hard time believing that it's Photoshop. Okay, so I'm just gonna scroll down and so everyone can see the artwork. One of the things that I really love about your work is that, the characters, the animals really have a lot of character. And was that intentional?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I've always been really inspired with children's art and like children's book art in general, as well as other types of science art. And I think like one of the really fun challenges of doing this kind of wildlife art that is based in realism, but that is for a narrative, um, is this challenge of like, of course, animals have emotions, but they absolutely don't have the same like recognizable facial expressions that humans do. Um, and I think one of the things I try to do is try to walk this kind of delicate line of conveying a little bit of emotion without breaking away from the animal's real anatomy.
Mm,
Um, and real behavior, which is like it's tricky and kind of subtle and like a lot of like I'll put a lot of thought into just like sometimes it's just a matter of like the angle of the head is a little different and it can look, it can make the animal look worried or content.
mhm,
Um, or something like just like I mean eyebrows are important. Animals don't always have the same type of eyebrows that humans do,
mhm,
but just sort of like the angle of the head
mhm.
and like, you know, really subtle brow things and even like just the placement of the light in an eye can kind of change. It's sort of giving us a little window to project feelings onto the animal that will serve the story. Um,
You talking about it in that way, I think that's the issue that I personally have with I cannot say the word ever. And help me out, please.
and I can't say it either.
Okay. Well, making animals look like
Yeah.
humans.
Uh-huh, yeah. And there's a spectrum. There's, you can have uh it can be a very realistic animal with very subtle, or you can go all the way and it's just a funny cartoon person with animal ears.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think you explained that where it makes sense in my mind as a person who tends towards realism.
Mhm.
Um, but there is a very fine line, and it can go either direction, and it's not that any of it's bad, but
Yeah.
it can turn in different directions, and it means different things when you add those human characteristics to an animal. So, but I will say that I believe that animals do have lots of personality. When I watch the birds outside in my garden, or if I
They're
watch my
very
cat, they have lots of personality.
absolutely.
So,
Um,
so you have a wide range of things here, from botanicals to even animation. This is one of the one. Oh, let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit. One of the ones that I really liked
right?
because it actually moves.
Yeah.
So. it's very cool to actually see these illustrations come to life in a video. So
This was a little kind of PSA that I made in collaboration with the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, and it's a little kind of advertisement asking for volunteers. So just putting this out there, everyone should volunteer for the Xerces Society. They're an amazing organization, and you get to learn a lot about bugs.
nice.
Who doesn't want that?
And so, what does the society do?
Yeah, it's a conservation for invertebrates. So butterflies, um, bumblebees, important pollinators, freshwater mussels maybe are less familiar, but they are a group of animals that are um, really important for freshwater ecosystems, and they're very like many species are imperiled. Um, so they're a really important organization. Um, and compared to conservation efforts centered around like the big charismatic animals, they're like have relatively less funding and like less publicity. So I think it's really important to give the invertebrates some love because they're really like they're the bottom of the food chain, and the big charismatic animals like can't live
Mhm.
if the insect populations are collapsing. So
Mm.
anyway, that's my little soapbox.
But we
Um,
appreciate that soapbox. Thank you.
yeah, and it takes very little commitment to just go out and take photos of insects and send them to someone as a volunteer, and it's really helpful for scientists.
Excellent. So I really want everybody to, there's a lot of work here. I want everyone to really come check out the website. There's also some fantasy art here, which I think is a great translation into something that's a little more creative and not so grounded in reality. If you want to talk about that really quickly and yeah, tell us about what made you start to explore this as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I love doing fantasy art also. This work is a little bit older. It's from before I went to grad school. I've like put this style kind of on the back burner for
Understood.
right now, but I'd love to go back to it and work on it some more at some point. Um and I'm really into creatures. I love real creatures, and I think that translates into made up creatures as well. I love a good dragon or unicorn.
Mhm.
Um and I love uh my favorite thing is designing these colorful costumes with patterns that are sort of like they live in this fairy tale space.
Mm.
So yeah, it's not what I'm prioritizing right now, but I think someday I would love to work on a book that has like maybe some whimsical princesses in funny hats or something.
Very cool, very
Um,
cool.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I love all of this. I really want to encourage you all to go over to Haley's website because I didn't even click on everything, and there's so much more to see. So, um, Haley, I just want to tell you thank you so much for sharing this. Um, Tell us what your website is
Yeah.
so that they can go and find it. And also let us know how they can find you on social media, what the best way is as well.
Yeah, so my website is Haley Grunloh. It's HALEYGRUNLOH.com. And I'm on almost all of the social medias with the same name. I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn, I think are the three that I'm the most active on. So that's the best way to find me.
Perfect, perfect. Haley, it has been such a pleasure to learn
Oh,
about your work and to learn more about you. Um, I hope you get a whole lot of work because I think you're so talented in nonfiction as well as in fiction work. I think that your work can translate into both of those. So thank you so much for sharing your work with us today.
Well, thank you so much. It's been so great to talk to you.
You too. You too.